injury. And my brother was here from California. He was the one that announced it to the family. And, he just casually mentioned, did y'all hear about the Collier boy that was in the hospital with the head injury? And, my mother just, spoke the words that just really did something to me. She said, I hope that boy don't die. It's like, you know, that's when I realized, what if he does? What if something happens to him? So, I retreated to my room just in total agony over that thought that something could happen to him, and, found myself at the hospital in neurotrauma ICU where he was. His family was there around his bed. The surgery was over, and there he was. And from that point forward, we haven't been separated since. But it took those 4 years of high school, actually the 8th grade as well, because that's when it really happened, 8th grade in middle school. But it took a while. But by that week before high school graduation, we were both 18. From that point on, when God got our attention, like life is precious. You can't, pay attention. He got our attention.
So is that the overall theme you want people to take away from the book?
God is a healer. That's that part of it. That's a chapter all by itself, the epidural hematoma and how that all happened. There's another incident when we were in New York City a week before the terrorists attacked on 9/11 to appear on ABC's Good Morning America, when William was surprisingly named the Dickey's 2001 American Worker of the Year. That's from a contest that I had entered him in. By now we've been married several years. We have 2 children by now also. And he actually had bought these pair of Dickey's pants, and I entered him in the contest just based on the tag that was on the pants, and he didn't know that I had entered him. He got dressed and just left the tags on the dresser, and I saw it and wrote it in. It was a 100-word essay, why you feel the nominee deserves to be the American Worker of the Year, a contest sponsored by Dickey's. I sent it in, my 100 words. I think it was like 99 words that I had sent in, and forgot about it. That was the summer, and probably May or June. And in August, I got a phone call saying that he had won. And actually, I had forgotten. I had written it because I never thought he'd win. I was just sending it in because I felt like he was the American Worker of the Year. To me, he was. He worked really hard. He had started a small lawn care and landscaping business, and, had done very well for himself. And by now, I had quit work, and I was a stay-at-home mom with our 2 boys who were at the time 2 and 7. And I was just writing it in, actually, just to write it in. Never thought anything would become of it. And, they called, and I was, the lady said that he had won. He was going to win a truck. We might get to be on Good Morning America. It was all these other surprises that would be along the way. And I'm just in shock. The 100 words that I wrote weren't all that. And that's what my sister told me after it was all over. It's like, what you wrote really wasn't, it just, but that was, again, God. He was the one, he was the one that left the tags there for me to see, the contest, because I didn't know about it. William bought the Dickey's pants because that's what he works in. It's not just a coincidence. None of these things are coincidences or accidental. I didn't just accidentally come up with the right words, because they received thousands of entries from all over America, every state. Everybody was sending in for this contest that I knew nothing about. And, that was God. It was God's plan for us. And like, on the back of the book, I also say, my prayers that you will see and feel Proverbs 3:5-6 come alive and speak to your heart as you take a walk with me inside my testimony. Proverbs 3:5-6. It's on my license plate. It's on my house. It's on everything. I live by that. I quoted in the beginning of the book. That is my favorite scripture. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not into thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy path. And that's what we have done. And, he was directing me to write that essay. He told me what to put on it, and I'm not knowing that that's what he's doing, but he's telling me what to write. And if we just trust him and allow him to direct our path, he will lead us to where he would have for us to go. And it was his plan all along in 2001 for William to win that contest. And it was a trip to New York City. We were on Good Morning America. We spoke to Charles Gibson on the TV show. And a week later, 9/11 happened. But we had been in New York a week prior. We could have been there the week of 9/11. But God saw fit to let us experience the magnificence of the whole grand thing that Dickey's put on for us, to treat us like kings and queens, for this wonderful trip. He allowed us to experience that before the devastation of 9/11. We could have been caught right there in the middle of New York City. We had driven by. We saw the World Trade Center. A week later, we saw it come down. We were back home a week later, and we look up, and there it is on TV coming down. And we had just seen it. We were there. That's not coincidental or accidental either. So that was another testimony within this testimony of us living inside the testimony. Another one, and this was the one that started the book. In 2007, we built our 4,700 square foot dream home on property which wasn't for sale, that was impossible to buy, from 32 unidentified heirs. The land had been vacant for almost 20 years because no one could buy the entangled heirship property. But the Lord made a way for us and cleared the path. I have come to realize this was all part of God's master plan for my life, which includes being married since 1986 to the absolute love of my life and being blessed with two precious boys who live inside this testimony with me. The whole ordeal with the land. It's right next door to my mother. I grew up in the house right next door to where I am now with my mother and father and the 5 children. I remember the people that lived in this house. The husband and wife, they had no children. Their parents were deceased, and then the wife died. When the husband died in 1988, it went to his heirs. And at the time, the next closest relatives would have been the children of his 3 deceased sisters. He had 3 sisters, and all of them were deceased. Each sister had 5 children. So that was 15 heirs. So in 1988, we did actually know who those 15 would have been. We didn't know them by name, but he had the 3 sisters. And, 1988, there was a niece who lived there, and I write about her in the book, Miss Owens. She was the one that was our contact person to find out who were these 15 people, where were they now, had they died, if they had died, who were their heirs, because heirship never ends. So it goes from generation to generation, and she thought by now it'd probably be 20-something. So we started that process to identify who they were, and at one point it seemed impossible, so we looked everywhere else because this land couldn't be bought. You didn't know who the people were, and I had contacted her probably a year prior and didn't have much success then, so we were still looking for a house. And actually, we looked everywhere. Nothing ever worked out. We couldn't find anything that we really wanted, and William really wanted this land next to my mother. My mother, his mother-in-law, he wants to build a dream home.
Yeah, that's amazing too.
That's a testimony in
That's a
itself
testimony.
too. The relationship that they have, it's just like a mother and a son. They're very close. They're as close as I am to my mother. So, the fact that my husband would want to build this house next to her, but I'm the one looking elsewhere because I'm thinking it's impossible. It's not for sale. It's just not going to work out. It's not for sale. We don't know who the heirs are. We've got to look elsewhere. And, we looked, and it's another year. So the whole drama is like a 3-year ordeal, and that's what started the testimony at church, the 3-year ordeal to get to the dream home. But during the process, we'd come back to this land, and then we'd go look elsewhere. We'd find other property. We kept coming back. Nothing ever worked out. Didn't meet our criteria. It was too far out. Wasn't in the right part of town. We wanted it somewhere else. We'd give up too much for this house that we were in to get to that house, just on and on and on and on.
Yes, I'm from a large family. I have 5 other sisters, but my mother's family is very large, like 15. So I understand, and I've been able to how difficult it would be to get to all these people who own land. But like we're from Florida, and it has to be maybe 5, 6 generations now. And my mother there were like 15 in her family, but then you have her father and her mother. I mean, the land is owned by so many people.
Everybody.
I could only imagine what the nightmare it had to be to get to all these different people, because we're all spread out all over the place now. And so whenever somebody wants to buy a part of our land, people trying to say, could you sign this paper? Or could you sign, I'm here. My other sisters, most of them are in Michigan. I have another one in Montgomery. So that's just our family law. That's not to mention my cousins, which are probably about 60 or more of just the first cousins, and then they have children, and it could be, that is amazing. So to get to the end of this, how did you finally get everybody's signature and get this property?
An attorney. We had to have an attorney. We wouldn't know what to do with that one, to identify all of the people, and through Mrs. Owens, the heir, the niece of Mr. Snipes, the one that owned the property. She identified them up to 20-something. She knew the 15 and which sisters had the children, which ones had died, and who their children were. But it had been like 16, 17 years since he had died. So as different ones had continued to age and die, she identified like 20-something, and we took it to an attorney, actually the only attorney that we could even find that could explain to us how it would work, because most of the attorneys and real estate experts and city and county officials, I had contacted everybody trying to figure out how to get to the end of it. How can we buy that property? He came up with the idea of how we could do it, and this is how it was. And we identified all of them through Mrs. Owens, and that's when, after on pencil and paper and contacting people in New York, in California, all over America, a family member that was overseas who just happened to be home at the time we were sending out the information, just so many different situations that these people were in.